Foreclosed homes are swelling the number of properties on the market and depressing prices. That in turn is discouraging builders. New construction plunged 10% last month. Sales are sluggish too. Appraisers like Jonathan Miller say one big reason for that is that sellers are asking too much.
What we're looking at is sellers are still looking at the last high watermark, either in their own co-op or condo, or the last high sale in their neighborhood or on their block. And I'd estimate that only about a third of the inventory on the market is actually priced close to market levels, and that's a problem.
Despite all the bad news coming from the property market, including more people losing their homes or getting closer to that desperate scenario, some economists remain optimistic.
We're in recovery. We've seen the beginning stages of recovery. It's going to be a bumpy recovery. So you're going to see some data points that are going to be somewhat discouraging.
Near-term prospects for the housing market are definitely gloomy. But for those seeking a bright spot, the experts do agree that conditions have deteriorated so much that when improvement finally does appear, it will look very strong.
China. Morgan Stanley's chairman in Asia, Stephen Roche, also says the region needs to speed up efforts to boost consumer spending and rely less on American shoppers. Sharon Jitley spoke to him and asked him how he saw the global economy performing.
I'm in the double dip camp, so I worry that the recovery is weak enough so that it doesn't leave the world with much of a cushion in the event of a bolt out of the blue or a shock. And they always seem to come. Recovering economies usually have enough vigor so that when a shock comes, it can sort of shrug it off. I think in a weak recovery, though, that is a real risk. I think we have to be careful, though, in framing policies to avoid a predicted double dip. We've got massive deficits all over the developed world, and I think we want to be very, very careful.
Now, President Obama has just completed a tour of Asia. How do you see the U.S. Trade relationship with Asia, particularly with China?
Both countries are very much looking to protect their own sources of resilience. In the case of the United States, figure out a new way to grow. And so trade in that context can be perceived incorrectly, in my view, as a threat, but perception is everything in the area of politics.
A lot of calls from the Americans and China's other trading partners for the Chinese currency, the yuan, to be depegged from the US dollar. When do you see that happening?
As long as China is facing a shaky recovery of its own, and I think the recovery in China is a lot shakier than the headline GDP numbers might seem to suggest, then I think there's a reluctance to move on the currency front, and there's also a reluctance to move on the currency front in response to international pressure. China does not like being put in a position where it is forced by external forces to make a policy adjustment.
Morgan Stanley's Stephen Roche talking to Sharon Jitley.
Will you step down from your post?
I agree with almost nothing in what you said, and I think almost nothing in what you said represents a fair and accurate perception of where this economy is today. You gave this president an economy falling off the cliff, values of American savings cut almost in half, millions of Americans out of work. Congressman, if you look at any measure of consumer and investor confidence today, if you look at any measure of the strength and stability and health of the American economy, if you look at any measure of confidence in the financial system, it is substantially stronger today than when the President of the United States took office. And that happened not on its own. It happened because of a set of tough, difficult choices. And this economy did not come into this simply facing the worst financial crisis in generations. It came into this with almost a decade, certainly 8 years of basic neglect of basic public goods. And fixing those problems is a central obligation of this Congress and this administration.
Tell all of that to the millions of Americans who no longer have jobs because of your decision.
Timothy Geithner on Capitol Hill today.